this is a really important story to tell, and to understand this is particularly now, because as I was saying before, race is central to our story. Race, race, race. And a lot of people don't like that. And a lot of people don't want to hear about it.
Hi, welcome to the end game. I'm Tom Shanahan. And that intro you saw with Ken Burns was his response to my question about Michigan State and telling the story, even though they've been overshadowed by many myths and fiction in college football integration, mostly about Alabama and Bear Bryant. And Ken Burns' advice to me was to keep plowing ahead. He talks about how race is central to our story, but a lot of people don't want to hear it, and we have to keep telling the story. And that's what we're doing here. And I want to add to that because I just read a new book by Doris Kearns Goodwin, and she cites Abraham Lincoln worried about Americans losing their history. During the Civil War, he talked about telling the history of the Revolutionary War. And Abraham Lincoln said in Springfield, Massachusetts in 1863, "We have to tell the stories of living history or they fade away. To restore them, the stories must be told and retold. We can look back at the mistakes made and the opportunities lost." And that's what we're doing with this program. I want to welcome my co host, Herman Bowles, who was the first black quarterback at his high school in Alabama, West Point grad, retired colonel, top American businessman with JLL in Washington, D.C. Herman, how you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great, Tom. Spring is finally sprung here, even though it's a little chilly in Washington today in the high 60s. But I'm very, very excited about our guest today. And in our little pre-call there, had an opportunity to share some things with him. But he and I we're a year apart in age, so we came up during the same time. I'm interested in seeing the perspective from Richmond, Indiana, and South Bend, Indiana, versus Florence, Alabama, and West Point, New York.
Yeah, Vegas Ferguson was a All-American at Notre Dame, running back. He was on the 1977 national championship team, and we crossed paths in 1977. Michigan State played at Notre Dame, and the Irishans kind of started out slow that year. And then this guy named Joe Montana came off the bench against Michigan State and rallied the Irish to a 16-6 win over the Spartans. And who knew that I would end up beating Vegas down the road? But I do remember I was a sports editor at the State News, the college paper. I do remember walking through the locker room and seeing Luther Bradley because he was such a prominent name then. I wasn't looking for you, Vegas. But I was on my way back to see Dan Devine for an interview after the game. But Vegas, welcome to our show. But before we go any further, a lot of people think Vegas has to do with Las Vegas. Tell us about your name.
Yeah, Vegas. Yeah, it's a lot easier than people saying my birth name, given name is Basquero Diaz, and my grandmother couldn't pronounce Basquero all the time, so she named me Vago, and then from Vago it became Vegas. That's how it kind of came down to that name today.
Do you like going to Vegas?
I tell people all the time, I don't gamble.
Is that right? Well, you know what? When this day of name, image, and likeness, if you were in college,
Oh,
you would get some really great deals.
oh boy.
We would, Herman, we would. No, I'll tell you, it is something how the game has changed. Not only the pro game, but the college game from that standpoint. It's
Yeah.
really, it's taking a turn.
It's getting hard to follow. Yeah. Well, before we start, we want to appreciate your great athletic success, but I want to start out telling our audience that for the past 30 some years, Vegas has been involved in the Richmond School District, and he's been a diversity officer. And I know that sometimes I'll be a substitute teacher to help me pay for the time I need to research my books and travel. And I know how important it is for Black males in the school system. And so I just want to take this moment to say that despite your tremendous success as an athlete, you've had a far greater impact on society, especially there in Richmond, as an educator. And I thank you for that. Talk about your career in education and tell us about it.
Well, back about 32 years ago, I came back to Richmond. Initially, I was in sales. I got out of pro football in 84. And I was, kind of looking for another place to go, another job. And I ended up working for a local company here in Richmond, but I was a sales rep in Chicago, Illinois. And at that time, I was always wanting to get back, into sports at some level, especially either the athletic director or as I didn't want to coach. That's one thing. That's one thing I didn't want to do. I didn't want to coach, but I didn't want to get back around young people because people came back and helped me when I was as a youth, and I remember those guys coming back that worked in the community and kind of gave their time and taught me a lot of things about life that they've experienced, and so they gave back to the community. They came back to give back to the community, and I always wanted to do that, either at the college level, like I said, at the college level as an AD or coming back to as a administrator in this district. So I came back, got my master's degree in education, and went on from there to do things here around the district. I didn't want to be a principal, but I wanted to be, involved, being able to get out of the office and go out into different buildings and talk to youth and just try to help those troubled youth, the at-risk youth mainly. And that's what I've been doing pretty much for 30 years. Is pretty much they gave me that leeway to kind of go out and talk to parents and work with the parents and the kids and try to, get them back interested in their education. Because that was important to me.
Herman, your thoughts?
Yeah, well, first of all, appreciate what you're doing. And as we spoke of earlier, I am familiar with Richmond, Indiana. My middle son, Nathaniel Burton Bulls, went to Earlham College and graduated from there in 2006. So and he actually played football over there in that little field over there. So it.
I probably watched him too.
Yeah, well, we probably saw him, but he did football and track there and graduated in 2006. And we made quite a few trips. It was so good at that time. I forgot the name of the airline, but I could get a direct flight from Washington, and we would basically fly out there in the morning and fly back in the afternoon, flying into Toledo. As you know, that's very, very close, and get a car and get over there and see it. So I just want to thank you for what you have done, particularly your desire to get back to youth. And from the research that I did, when Notre Dame was even recruiting you, I think you were living with your grandmother at the time, and the thing that was important to you was education. Why don't you tell us about that? Because any young people out there listening to this, I want them to understand that.
Well, sports is great. People can tell you you can be very talented, but in the end, you got to put that away. You know what I'm saying? The game, whether it's basketball, football, or any kind of sport you're playing, at some stage in life, you got to put that away. And so you have to be able to fall back on something. And the most important thing to me at that time, my grandparents raised, my grandfather, my grandmother raised us. My mom passed when I was about 8 years old. There's 7 of us. And then my aunt passed, and there was three more. And so my grandparents took in 10 kids at one time. So then they raised us, from that point on. And so that was always one of the things they preached, because they didn't have an education. 8th grade education or 5th grade, whatever it was back when they were coming through as our grandparents. And so my grandmother always stressed education, especially when the recruiters came around. That's one of the first things she would ask, well, is he going to graduate? And that's one thing I can say about Notre Dame. of all the people who came in to recruit me, that was the first thing the recruiters, Brian Bullock was his name, was a line coach. And first thing came out of his mouth, he said, if your son comes, he told my grandparent, if he comes to Notre Dame, he'll graduate in 4 years if he does what he's supposed to do. And we're going to make sure he does that. And so that was so impressive. And like I said, everybody that came in, the Michigans, the Ohio States, nobody said that. And, they said, with a football player I could be, and that was but when it's all said and done, even today, even I went back, I was out like 37 when I went back to get my my master's degree in education. So, that education has always been important to me, and I pass it on to my kids and as well. So like I said, when it's all said and done, it's not what you've done in life, it's who you helped. And I think that's that's what I want to be remembered for. Not so much with all the things I've done athletically, but what I've given back to help somebody else. And education is part of that.
Yeah, and of course, the reason we have Vegas on our show today is he's in my new book, The Right Thing to Do, The True Pioneers of College Football Integration. And a theme of it is that Duffy Daugherty led college football integration, but also his assistant coaches followed his blueprint when they became head coaches. And one of them is Dan Devine. And one of the things I had learned is in my research was that even though we're talking about mid-1970s, Dan Devine took over in 1975 and basically inherited Ara Parseghian's recruiting class. So his first recruiting class was 1976, and there were 10 black freshmen. One of them was Vegas Ferguson, and that was the most in program history. And when I contacted Vegas, he said this was something that had always been on his mind and he wanted to learn more about it. And it was perfect for me because Notre Dame Sports Information Department is not very good at helping people outside of the major media outlets. So all of a sudden I had an All-American volunteering to help do research for me. But talk about your experience there at Notre Dame and realized that there weren't a lot of black athletes and a lot of black students, but it was starting to change at Notre Dame under Dan Devine.
For sure. Devine came in 75. He recruited, that was his first year of recruiting. I think he had Jerome Heavens and Jimmy Browner and about 4 or 5 other guys. And then I came in 76. And I think that class, his first class might have had about maybe 5 or 6 black players at that time. And then our group came in, we had 10. And then the following year, in 77, they recruited 1.
Right.
Only had 1. I said, wow. I mean, then you start to, really as a kid, you're not looking at that. You know what I'm saying? You're looking at just playing. But as you start to look at the numbers, you kind of see that they were still kind of, backwards in that respect, in terms of, they couldn't recruit, more than 10 or 10 players at one time. That's the most I've ever seen since then too. But well, now of course it's not loud. Now it's a lot different. But even back then, I think we didn't really notice it until I got out and looked back. And like until you put it up and I actually looked at it, I said, wow. And that, it was quotas back then. They even had quotas back then at the number of that they, black players that they would recruit every year.
And then a good ally you told me that Devine inherited was a former Notre Dame player and assistant coach that he retained, Brian Bullock, who related well to black kids. Talk about his influence.
Forgot about Coach Boo. We call him Coach Boo. Brian Bullock. He went all over the country. He recruited in our class. He was in Arizona, California, Texas. He got guys from Texas in our class, Florida. All of them were recruited by him. It was just amazing when we look back and saw the number of players he recruited. The Stones, Jim Stone out of Washington State. He had 3 brothers come. He had the Browners brothers, all the Browner brothers from Ohio, Ross Browner and his 2 brothers. So he was just good about talking. He knew how to talk to people, and he knew what was important to the parent. And he knew that education was at the top of the list, and he knew that that was important for us. That our parents knew that we just weren't football players. And back then, they were paying players, and they alumni were back. Some schools were you know giving people houses and buying cars, and Notre Dame did none of that. They didn't have. He said, "We're not going to give you anything. One thing I can guarantee you, if you come here and you work hard, you will have an education at the end of your 4 years." And you couldn't ask for much more than that. But because then you start looking to get people that were offering you some things. Well, what if you got hurt? And Coach Booth said, if you get hurt, you're still gonna have a scholarship at Notre Dame, no matter what. So that was important. And he emphasized we lifelong friends till he passed away. I still talk to his wife today. And go see her when I go up to the games, or go up to South Bend. I talk to her. That's just the love. They just took you in as family, and that was important for us, for me, in at that time.
Yeah, and Herman, you've been a leader a long time as a colonel in the Army and a top executive. Talk about the influence people can have on an organization's direction.
Oh, no doubt about it. And seeing that Vegas, one of the things that I talked about was my high school coach, Buddy Moore, who had to make this decision down in Florence, Alabama, where, Friday night lights are real,
Right.
to start a black quarterback. And, he was in the reserves, ended up being a major general and adjutant general for the state of Alabama. And I just was on a panel this weekend at Stanford and talking about leadership. And leadership is about showing up. Leadership is about authenticity. Okay. Leadership is about, living the standard. And, when you have times that race is involved in that, it's easy for people to, kind of put things under the sheet. And obviously the country right now, we're in a corporate perspective, we're in a challenging time right now. However, the organizations that I'm involved with, where I have an opportunity to influence, we're going out and saying the following, Vegas. As we think of America, it's certainly a melting pot, and this melting pot is going to continue to melt. And in the year 2040, 2045, majority of people in America are going to be people of color.
That's right.
And what I'm seeing in the boardroom is this is not a social program. This is not a feel good program. This is a business imperative. Who's going to make your products? So you need the ingenuity and innovation from everybody, including people of color and women. Who is going to sell your products? They need to understand it. And the most important of all, who's going to buy your products? And if you don't have an organization that is diverse in nature, thought, process, gender, ethnicity, you're not going to be as successful. So as that old philosopher, Wayne Gretzky says, you got to skate to where the puck's going to be.
Yeah,
Right on time.
Yeah, good stuff, Herman. As I mentioned, Dan Devine was on Duffy Daugherty's staff, along with Bob Devaney, who went to Nebraska, Bill Yeoman, who desegregated the Houston program, Sonny Grandelius, who had success in Colorado. They all expanded opportunities for Black athletes. And three of them, Devine, Devaney, and Yeoman, are in the College Football Hall of Fame, as is Duffy Daugherty for coaching. But so I have a chapter on Devine about the state because he did so much there. And then he did so much at Missouri. That's a separate chapter. He had black athletes in 1958. People don't understand that. That's 12 years before Bear Bryant had a black player. And then I didn't know how much I get out of a chapter on Notre Dame until I realized that he had also changed the landscape of Notre Dame. But also, there's a story about how Devine was never really appreciated at Notre Dame because he had to follow a popular coach like Ara Parseghian. And as I talked to Vegas, I learned that he was empathetic to Divine for that reason. Um, and and as John Feinstein wrote in the Washington Post way back in 1980, Divine's final year, he said Divine's biggest crime is he wasn't there at Parsegian. Talk about how tough that was for him, Vegas, to take over the program, yet he delivered a national championship.
Oh yeah, well prior, everybody loved Eric Parsegian. His charisma, he was just a popular guy. And Dan Divine came in. Remember now, he came in leaving pro football. He left the Green Bay Packers to come to Notre Dame, and people didn't realize how he was treated there. They ran him out of town. So of course they caught Notre Dame people caught wind of that as well. And and plus error, following error, he just came in at a time was just, they wasn't going to appreciate him. But Divine was steady. He had good coaching staff. He had good people around him. And he wasn't a very outgoing guy. People don't realize that as well. Now, he's not going to come out and shake your hand and pat you on the back. He's just going to be quietly sitting back doing what he does. And again, he surrounded himself with good people that would come out and talk to you and coach you. And he, I think that was his success. Again, he was a little older then. Again, he had been beat up at Green Bay. They killed his dog up there. They did a lot of crazy stuff, ran him out of town. And so he was kind of suspect of everybody as well coming into Notre Dame. But as time went on, again, he wasn't he wasn't a rah-rah guy like Lou Holtz. He wasn't going to fire you up that way. But you were always prepared. That's one thing I can say about Divine and his coaching staff. They always had you prepared. And again, that's his leadership style. And so he allowed the coaches to be a part of that. And that's one thing I remember appreciate about him the most. He wasn't trying to coach everybody, but he kind of put it together. And that's what coaches do.
Yeah, and the other thing I remember you telling me about being recruited is most schools were recruiting you as a defensive back, and you wanted to play running back. But part of that process was Divine trying to make you a north-south runner. Tell us that story.
Well, yeah, when I first went to camp, when we first got up as freshmen, we would come in early. And anyway, when practice started, in the mornings, I would be either I'll be a defensive back, or in the afternoons, I'll be a running back, or vice versa. But anyway, when they finally, Hank Coleman was our backfield coach. He had played in Missouri with Divine. He was our backfield coach. One day he just said, stay over here on the offense. You're not going back on defense. But then from there, we would run plays, and I always was just I would always finish run. I mean, I run 15 yards or whatever down the field, but I would always make a lot of moves. I didn't want nobody hitting me, and so I would either run out of bounds or I'd fall down. And so when I would be out there, jerking and moving around and not letting anybody tackle me, he on his squat box, he'd be up in a tower. And when he picks up his speaker, he said, "Ferguson, run north and south." I would be going east and west, and I said, anywhere I could go to get out from somebody hitting me. And he didn't like that. He wanted you to run straight into the hole and let everybody hit you. I said, well, and I said under my breath, I said, well, you ain't down here running the ball. So I'm not gonna get hit. But it was fun. We teased him about that, and guys teased me about that. And it was as a freshman, I didn't know any better. I just ran like to daylight, and so took a lot of.
Plus, it's instinct, right?
That's you send somebody. Yeah, and the funny thing about it, like you said, instinct. We had a guy, Jim Gruden. His sons coach pro. Couple of his sons coach pro football. He was our backfield. He came in my junior year, and I learned so much about, like you said, about running the ball, reading the defense, and learned about and that's something that he taught me that made me successful my junior and senior year. And I always wanted to, thank him for that, because he recruited me at Indiana. the funny thing about it, Jim Gruden, he recruited me as when I was coming out of high school to Indiana. And he told me, when I told him I was going to Notre Dame, he said, one day I'm going to coach you. He said, one day I'm going to coach you. I said, okay, coach, I appreciate that. I love the guy. And then my junior year coming in, to camp, he was there. He said, I told you I was going to coach you. And I tell you, from that point on, we ran the I formation, and I learned so much from him reading the defenses and learning the game of football. I learned from him.
Yeah.
So you were, another thing I understand, that your first visit to Notre Dame was not an official visit, that you kind of tagged along with a relative. And tell us what that weekend was like and when that occurred.
Lamar Lundy, and his son came back my sophomore year from California, moved back here. Lamar didn't move back, but Lamar was my cousin. His mom was my grandfather's sister, brother. So Lamar is my cousin, and so Lamar Jr. was being recruited to Notre Dame. Air was recruiting.
Yeah. Let me interject here, Vegas. Lamar Lundy, great player with the Los Angeles Rams and also from Purdue. I think he played football and basketball at Purdue. Go ahead, Vegas.
Yeah, that's right. That's my cousin. So the local guy here is a local pharmacist, was going to we call him Marty Lundy, take him up to Notre Dame for a Notre Dame game. He said, and I was a sophomore, he said, well, Vegas, I'm going to take you too. And so he took me up, and he took us up, and we were able to go after the game, we were able to go into the locker room to meet Air and some of the players. And that was the highlight of, I said, well, I didn't know Notre Dame was in Indiana until that. And like I said, local alumni who graduated from there, the pharmacist took us up there. And from then on, I knew where Notre Dame was. I still didn't think I was going to go to school there. I wasn't looking at that because I was a sophomore. So but it was interesting to be around that kind of atmosphere, to be in that kind of locker room, to see that kind of history at firsthand, going in the tunnel, going in the locker room before the game and after the game. Those guys is huge. I said, man, these guys, I said, I don't know if I can play this. Guys are big. And I was a sophomore in high school, and Marty ended up going to Berkeley and playing out there as a tight end. Just outstanding athlete he was. And that's the story about, us going to Notre Dame. My first experience with Notre Dame.
Yeah, and the other thing I remember about your recruiting story is you went around campus with Ross Browner, and later with Luther Bradley, and they both told you the same story. If you're not going to plan on graduating, don't come here.
Yeah, get student first. That's the first thing. I think Ross was with me. I think Ross had me first, and then Luther had me. But the first thing Ross said, hey, I know you're a good player, but he said, if you're not coming here to be a student, don't come, because you're a student first. I said, wow. I kind of looked at the corner. I said, yeah, okay. Ross is big, And then I had in the second half, I had Luther, and Luther came out of nowhere and said, hey man, when you come here, man, you're a student first. Don't think you're gonna come here and just play football. If you want to graduate, you're going to graduate if you come here, and you're going to be a student first. And that's what they student first. And that's my thought process when I went. I'm a student first. And we had guys miss practice. It had labs and stuff like, and that's because that's what they practiced what they preached. If you had an assignment due or something that you had to have done, you missed practice. I was unheard of.
I don't think that was heard of today.
Yeah, that's if they go at all. Because it's becoming, it's almost like it's becoming a business.
It is a business.
Yeah.
I didn't want to say it like that. It is. So it's not about education anymore. It's about how many people I can get in the stands, how much money can we bring in, and now it's how much we able to pay the players to come.
Yeah, and let me get in one more dig at Michigan and Ohio State, that on your recruiting trips there, they only talked football. But back to Dan Devine and how he isn't appreciated the way he should be in college football annals. He was 3-0 against Bear Bryant, and his team was an underdog each time. The Missouri beat integrated Missouri team beat Alabama's all-white team in 1968 in the Gator Bowl. Ripped them 35-10. And then as Notre Dame's coach, he beat them Alabama at South Bend, and then Alabama when they went down to Legion Field.
My freshman year, we played them.
Yeah. Um, and I guess that goes back to a team being very prepared. What do you think about that? Dan Devine not really being known for that just kind of success.
Oh, no, yeah, like I told you before, you're gonna be prepared to play. I mean, it doesn't matter who the team is, who the coach is. Just so happened, it's funny, just so happened that game, in 76, when we played them at Notre Dame, Jerome Evans had gotten hurt. And we didn't have a fullback. We had Al Hunter, running back. And they wasn't afraid to, we're gonna play. They put me in at fullback. I mean, I didn't play no full. I'm a running back. And so, but they had us all, the whole time they had us doing practices all the way up to that game. I would, switch in and out, but I didn't, they wasn't afraid to play, to take a chance on anybody. They knew the personnel that well, I'm trying to say. We're going to stick a freshman in there. His first game, that first game I ever started against Alabama. And it was amazing. It was an amazing day. Yeah.
Well, I'm from Alabama. I'm from Alabama, so I might have been rooting against you then.
Oh, I'm sure. I don't have a problem. But you know what? When I was playing, I wasn't thinking about nobody rooting, who they rooting for or who they rooting against. I was trying to say, you guys gonna hit me. That's all I can tell you.
Herman, talk about different leadership styles. Devine didn't have necessarily a magnetic personality, but he was successful.
I mean, he, maybe I'll say somewhat of a George Welsh. I'm certain he was a disciplinarian. He expected expertise, and he was a CEO coach. And what that means is we're going to delegate to the position coaches to do the thing you need to do. I will get close to your players, but I'm not going to be your player's friend. Okay. And I expect you to do your part to build for the entire team. Did I explain it?
Absolutely. On target. That exactly what it was. Seriously. That's what I just said earlier. He had his coaches, assistant coaches, were the coaches. And he directed them. And so it all came together. He didn't, like you say, he was your best friend. He didn't want to know you like that, but he expected you to perform.
Well, I want to talk about one thing here real quickly, Tom, is that you went to a Cotton Bowl, and can you see this guy? It was your quarterback.
That's the guy who came off the bench in the Michigan State Notre Dame game.
Oh.
Okay, so that was at the Super Bowl this year. So Joe was definitely a role model for me. And I understand there was this game, and you guys were down. You blocked a punt and scored a touchdown. You get the ball back, and you got a chance to run 2 plays. Go through that for us, particularly on the very last play and what the coaching staff did.
Oh, I tell you, it's amazing. It was a cold game. Nobody wanted to be out there playing, and I tell you, Joe gets to start the half. He had, they had to give him soup. He finally comes out, and our comeback started, and we blocked a punt, scored a touchdown.
Who are you playing? Let's set the stage.
Okay, Houston. Houston, we played Houston in the Cotton Bowl, -6 on the field, ice everywhere, called the Ice Bowl. And like I said, it was freezing. And like I said, it came down to the last 2 plays. We made the comeback. We were down 34-12, and with 7 minutes left in the game. And so again, we blocked the punt and scored, and we did something, and Joe, they got a turnover, we got a turnover and scored. And then it came down to the last play of the game. We the first play of the two plays, Chris Haynes, Joe, well, matter of fact, Joe looked to the sideline and said they're going to want to send a play in. And the coaching staff just waved at him, like waved him off, just shook their heads and just whatever you want to run, you run it. Joe got down on his knee and said, okay, Vegas, the first play we ran, he called it. And Chris Haynes ran I cleared, and Chris Haynes ran a quarter route to the end zone, right in the corner. And Joe didn't hit it. Came back, so we only had one play left. I had time for one play. Came back, Joe got on one, and he said, okay, Chris, here's what I want you. Chris, I'm over. I can get open again. So he said, okay, Chris. He said, Vegas, you clear again. He said, Chris, I want you to go right over there in that corner. And I'm gonna look for you over there. And he got on the ground and drew it. He kind of drew it when he wanted him to run, how he wanted to run it. And sure enough, he ran. I was standing right there when he threw the ball, and I was standing right next to Chris, about 5 feet away from him when he caught it. And I tell you, I don't ever celebrate. Never. I never show my emotions on the field. It was so cold. We were so beat up. I was jumping up and down like crazy, like we just won the Super Bowl or something.
Yeah,
But it was an amazing game. I mean, it was just amazing how Joe came down. It came down to him saying, okay, guys, we're gonna run this play.
yeah.
And it was a blessing.
That's a great story. It's right out of the Montana Bill Walsh days, drawing plays up.
Had so many of those kind of games. So
Now, are you in contact with Joe at all these days?
I see him at events. We go to events, and he comes back. He did a commercial about a year ago up in Notre Dame. They wanted us to come back with me and Chris Haynes come back with him and go. They was doing that documentary of him, and they had us come back and talk about playing with him and stuff like that. So other than that, I don't see him very often unless it's a function or something. But when I do see him, it's just like just like yesterday. He's just so down to earth. He's just so nonchalant. You just don't. The guy just he just got that charisma about him, that thing about him,
Yeah.
So.
And I want to bringing up that story about the Gator Bowl. I want to remind people, one of the themes of my book is the true pioneers of college football integration haven't received their credit because of this 1970 USC Alabama myth. Most of the details of that myth were made up 20 years after the game was played. There was no overnight impact from that game. And in fact, the premise of the entire myth is that Bear Bryant wanted to lose the game. He wanted his fans to be shocked by a big black fullback, Sam Cunningham, running over his team so that he could recruit black players. Well, that ignores the fact that Dan Devine, with an integrated Missouri team, routed Alabama 35-10 in 1968. Also in 1968, Auburn lost to integrated Southern Methodists, led by Jerry Levias scoring a touchdown and a 2-point conversion at Auburn. SMU won the game. 1969, Tennessee, integrated, led by the great Jackie Walker, the first black All-American in the Southeastern Conference, routed Alabama 41-14 at Legion Field. And then in the 1969 Liberty Bowl, integrated Colorado put up 47 points when they beat Alabama. So in reality, it was routine by then for Alabama to get beat by an integrated team, but they successfully got away with that myth. Let's wrap up. I want to tell one more story about Dan Devine in the movie Rudy, about how Devine has not been treated fairly by pop culture. And then we'll wrap up our comments. In the movie, we all know the movie Rudy, the inspirational story. And at the end, Rudy's disappointed to find out he's not going to get to dress for the last game of his career at home. And the scene of the movie is all the Notre Dame players walk in, and put their jerseys on Dan Devine's desk. This is the 1975 season, so a year before Vegas got there, and said, "Rudy can use my uniform." In fact, Joe Montana later said that never happened. But Devine explains in his book that Anthony Pizzo, the director and producer, said that he had to make him the bad guy to help sell the movie the right way. And Devine's comment was, "Well, whatever will help Rudy, go ahead." And Devine said he never read the script. And then he said when he saw the movie, he didn't realize what a bad guy he was put out to be. And my point is, popular culture would never do that to Bear Bryant. They would never make him a bad guy. Uh, so I guess again, Vegas, if you could talk about how unfair that was to Dan Devine's image for all he did for college football, expanding opportunities and diversity.
Oh, no doubt about it. I mean, that hurt everybody. And again, a lot of players spoke out about that as well. A lot of black players spoke out about that happening, that scene. And it just tarnished the good things Devine did, and what he accomplished. Just further, tarnished that, we thought at the time. But the beauty of it is the good things come out of bad things that happen. He now has a statue in one of the four corners of the stadium dedicated to Devine. And so, those kind of things still resonate today with me. But when you actually go back to Notre Dame and look and see that they have something of remembrance of him, I have a gate named after him, and a statue. We gave for that. We contributed to that because we thought he needed to be remembered and not forgotten.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm glad you brought that up because there's statues of Dan Devine at Notre Dame, and I don't know what they have at Missouri or Arizona State recognizing him, but I'm sure they have something. There's a statue of Bill Yeoman at Houston. There's a statue of Bob Devaney at Nebraska.
Let's give Bill credit for being a West Point graduate.
And played at West Point, right? And all these guys would be embarrassed to know that Michigan State has not put up a statue of Duffy Daugherty, their mentor. They had so much respect for. I got to sneak that in since you brought that up. Vegas, final comments, and let me add to the reader that not only do I have the chapter in my book about Notre Dame and Dan Devine, but I wanted to have part 4 of my book is essays by various people who were influenced by the opportunities a football scholarship gave their family. For a lot of the Underground Railroad players at Michigan State. And then I had Vegas wrote one of the essays about what it meant for him and his family being raised by grandparents. So that, Vegas, you're in there in 2 parts. Give us your final comments. And then as usual, Herman, you bring us home.
Well, I just want to say, it's an honor meeting Herman. He's accomplished a lot in his life, through football and in his life. I just want to thank you for allowing me to meet him. But again, I appreciate you, Tom, for what you're trying to do. You're doing the right thing. You try to, promote and make sure the right people are recognized for the right reasons, and it should be. And I tip my hat off to you as well for doing that. And anything again I can do to help that, I'm just appreciative that you would allow me to be that part, do that, be a part of that. Seriously.
Yeah. Thank you, and it's a thrill to hook up with you, Herbert.
Well, Vegas, you mentioned it, and certainly an honor to meet you. And through Tom and doing this, we both do it out of our hearts in terms of what we want to do to make the world and definitely this sport. And we focus primarily on football. However, we talk about other sports as well. And the opportunity to meet people like you that, I only knew, the newspaper, and we didn't even talk about you being drafted in the first round, and how important that was. And to you, your very humble presence to this day is something that, your grandmother should be very proud of, because I'm going to say that she instilled that into you. And this opportunity for you to show in this age when many people are just concerned about what's in it for me. the fact that you not only went and finished your degree at Notre Dame, had a successful pro career, business career, and then went to your hometown to do something to elevate the youth. And you're going to be remembered for that in some way. So congratulations for what you've done. And let's add in there for you young people listening, went back and got your master's degree. And that took discipline and grit. And you'd been out there being the man. And you went back to writing papers and doing research. And all of that is coming back full fruition as you work in my son's hometown of Richmond, Indiana.
So bad.
Well done, Herman. That's why I have you on here. You can articulate things so much better than me. All right. Thanks for watching The End Game. This will be episode 23. And there are many other episodes you watch on my website, tomshanahan.report. And there's also purchase links to my book on my website, tomshanahan.report. Thanks for watching.